going to call this meeting to order. Thank you all for being here this morning in person. Item number 2, approval of the minutes from January 12th. Do my colleagues have any changes or do they wish to approve the minutes? You will approve the minutes. Item 3 for consent. I would like to pull item 3A and Councilmember Zvonek would like to pull item 3A. So I would like, I'm sorry, 3E. So we can go ahead and approve B, C, and D forward.
So for 3A, John, do we have?
Yes, sir.
All right. Do you want a presentation or do you just want to ask a question?
I would just like to see where we're at, what our upcoming numbers are for the academies. What are we looking at as far as laterals? How many applications are we getting in? What is the interest on this women's academy? And I would like an update on that. I personally signed up to do this women's academy myself. So I would like an update on all of that.
Okay. Actually, I think the details of those particular questions are coming from or Reagan Payne.
So I can speak to the academy. So we just started 7 laterals this past week. So that's great news. A few more than what we have historically been getting. The next lateral academy starts May 8th. It looks like those numbers are higher than we expected as far as the number of applicants. We're processing about 18 to 19 right now. We certainly won't get all of those, but the process is also still open. So hopefully we'll have some more trickle in as well. But right now, I would estimate 8 to 10, usually about 50% attrition based on the applications. We're starting to travel on the backgrounds right now. That's where we are in the process. And then with regard to basic applicants, I don't know if Matt, you might have some more current information than I do.
Last I knew, we were at 17 for the February 27th Academy. That number only goes down between now and February 27th, so I would caution against number 17 being sold in stone, but I would say it drifts more toward 12 to 15 as we get closer to February 27th. But I'll take a moment to congratulate Chris and the recruiting team on keeping a entry-level recruit who was debating an offer from Wheat Ridge and Aurora and was leaning Wheat Ridge, but their team convinced him.
Do you know on May, based on applications?
Don't have a lot of numbers for May. I know we just certified a list for May and they're going to start into the testing process, but commission meeting Tuesday will revolve around who will do the rest of the processing for that May Academy.
And what is that looking like? I mean, speaking of that with the Civil Service Commission, what is that looking like? Obviously, council brought forward a resolution requesting what we would like, how we would like to see this hiring process go. How is that working right now?
January 7th commission meeting. Most people who are in the room here were at that meeting or at least representatives from there and tried to sort out that very question. More to come on that next Tuesday and where that goes from there.
So I was gonna say the next step we've got again on Tuesdays, we're having in that January meeting when we started the conversation, one of the first things that really came up and Matt in particular said, hey, can we talk about the backgrounds? And so that's where we're starting our efforts now. If we wanted to sort of move those backgrounds over to HR, move that process over to that. So that's what we're going to come forward next week and do a presentation from HR to the commission about, this is what their process currently looks like as we understand it. This is what it would look like if we took it to HR, have that discussion on the background piece of it, and then we'll come back to them in March with our recommendations, staffs and the departments for what the remainder of the process would look like if from our perspective.
And we go ahead.
So I know that in the resolution we passed, we asked for an update every 60 days of council. So since we're only 90 days away from the deadline that was set by the consent decree to make these changes, is there a chance? I know we don't have a study session till the end of the month, I believe, because of the.
Not until March 6th, and so we're planning on coming in.
Yeah, so if we can, that's great. Perfect. Great.
And then I don't know who can speak to this, but we've come out pretty boldly now with this 30 by 30 pledge to try and recruit women. Are we just saying that, or what are we actively doing to look for women?
We are actively trying to, in all of our efforts, are going to be trying to be more representative of women and casting a wide net. And that is not some of the pushback or feedback we've gotten that's derogatory on social is, are you decreasing your standards? And that's not it. And it's not a woke mentality. As a former law enforcement officer, little girls are not typically told that they can be cops. So we just want to get that message out there. In addition, you asked about the Women's Academy. So Mary Fernandez was one of our recruiters. This was sort of her idea to do. And it's just to give a snapshot of what it might be like to be a cop and make it like a safe area. The last one we had didn't have a lot of participation. I don't know if I'd love to talk with you on the side about if you contacted her or what that looked like.
I have spoken with her.
Oh, okay. But we did a hot wash of it and just talked about, we want to do this quarterly. I think we're going to make it 1 day versus 2, because if you're someone who has a family or other obligations on the weekend, it's a lot of time to do 2 full days. And then what is the curriculum that would actually be the most valuable to attract interested applicants? And so we don't have dates set up yet. We have another meeting scheduled for in 2 weeks with that group. And we also want to have it be both female and male instructors, because we want to show that there's a lot of men that support women in law enforcement as well, obviously. So more to come. I'm happy to provide an update on that.
Yeah, and let me know, however, I mean, I feel the same way, and I don't see this as any kind of woke movement. 6 of my 9 years in the Air Force, I was a cop. So I want to help any way possible to attract women. Standards weren't lowered for me, so I don't think that's even a question. And I would stand up to anybody attacking the city saying that, but I would like to see some more women. It was shocking to see how low our numbers are in Aurora compared to other departments. I take that personally,
Right.
So let me know however I can.
Sure. And so just a little bit of a follow on. So what we're going to be is very intentional about all of our imagery, making sure that we're showing, better representation. We want to look at internal leadership for women. How do we do more upward mobility? So we're going to be looking at other agencies and how they've employed it. We're at 11%. The national average is 12%. 12% is still low. So we're open to all ideas, but what would be helpful for us is any, sharing of social posts that we have, just to amplify our efforts. That would be great.
Yeah. Okay. And I do understand that Mary Fernandez was the only woman in recruiting and she was taken out of recruiting. We currently have 0 women in recruiting. Is that true?
She was not taken out. She elected to go out, but right now we do not have any full-time female recruiters. We are developing auxiliary recruiters. And so that will hopefully include, obviously more women, but also recruiters who speak other languages so we can reach out to other people in the community.
Perfect. Thank you.
Any other questions on 3A? Okay. 3E.
So before we start, Jeff said he needed the password, panelist password. Whoever can take care of that.
Yeah, he's good.
Okay. Good.
I'm good. I'm on now. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
So 3E.
3, John, is that going to be you or Lieutenant Delana?
However we want to have them, I'll take it.
Okay, so we'll start same thing. Presentation, just an update.
Just an update. Yeah, I think just an update.
Okay, so the 303 vehicles that were received as recovered steals in the city during the month of January. We had issued the voucher program that covers the first 3 days. It was all vehicles except for one that didn't get picked up yet, and 44 other ones that were after the 3 days. So that was right. Your backup told you that we issued 72,000.
Yeah, it's 72,900 for what? Yeah, not issue.
And then 6,600 or 66,000 when it was cashed in. So they stopped by our office, we issue a voucher, verify that they're the right owners, that they've got the insurance, and then we release them, and they go to M&M, the contractor, pick it up, and then that voucher comes back over to us.
Got it.
And so that's how that process worked. It's going really well as far as the implementation. So I guess-
That's great. So I guess one of the things the reason why I wanted to pull it is just from a communication standpoint. Obviously, this is something that we've heard a lot about, and people are frustrated as they feel like after they've had their car stolen, they're re-victimized when they have to go and pay to get out of impound. So I think to the extent that we can do a better job of publicizing the fact, because I looked at this and I was surprised at how well it seems to be going. And maybe it's not going as well as the numbers suggest, but it seems to me, based on what I'm reading, it is, and I think we should make sure that the public is aware of that. Go ahead.
I was going to ask for actual sort of somebody actually out at the lot from Lieutenant Delana and your staff. Any on the ground feedback?
I did ask my staff out there how it's being perceived by the public. most people don't realize that it's new, that they would have had to pay in the ones that I talked to on the phone, unfortunately know that they have to pay because their car was picked up in 2022. Right now, like you said, getting that out to the public, right now, our basic big word of mouth is our officers calling the owners on the phone and my impound technicians calling the owners on the phone and explaining this new process and how the city council has put this into to law this year to try it out and see how it is. Everybody is don't get me wrong, they're very happy when they come in and they don't have to pay. And like John said, we've only had one owner who came past that date at this point. And would have to have a few more fees. You still get those 3 days, those 5 days based on when your car came in paid for. And then they only have the $40 storage fee for those days afterwards. So it is still a much smaller amount of money that these citizens have to pay.
Thank you. That's all I
We'll
wanted.
keep you all updated as we go. And again, the overall intent was to take that million and try and make it last for a full year. So obviously, if we see a spike in the spending rate, we'll let you know, but our goal was to sort of make sure that we can take that benefit and balance that out over the whole year. And I think we're on track for that. The numbers are looking good right now.
Right, on to item 4A, targeted violence prevention program.
And I believe the application, they pulled up. Morning, Council. I'm Courtney Tossian. I oversee our crisis programs, which is our call responder teams and our alternative response program. We also, within those programs, have a targeted violence prevention program. You may have been somewhat familiar with it. I know we had an incident last year where we kind of got involved. So I would just like to tell you what we do and how we can be of assistance to not only you all, but the community as a whole. And at the end of this, I will have an example of success that this team has had. So our program is a targeted violence prevention program. We call it TVP. And what that is, it's a subunit within our crisis response team. So it's pairing a clinician, an officer, and a case manager, so a case coordinator, navigator, to all work to prevent acts of mass violence. So if you've turned on the news in the last year or so, or the last 3 years, you'll see that this is plaguing our nation as a whole. So we in Aurora and Colorado as a whole have had many instances of mass violence. This program is exactly what we utilize to prevent these attacks and also provide support when they do happen. So this is just a very collaborative effort, not only within the city of Aurora, but all of our local and national partners. And that includes the federal government, so FBI, Secret Service, and Department of Homeland. Just some history, I won't go into all of this, but the main highlights are that this program began in 2020 from a grant. We have continued to apply for grants. Crisis response teams. We are nationally and internationally recognized as the model for this kind of work. We presented in Helsinki, Finland. We presented with the Strong Cities Network, and I travel nationally to teach people how to make programs like this. We use a public health approach, so we're a pre-criminal intervention program. That's not to say that we don't sometimes have cases that turn into criminal action. When that happens, we look at how we use that criminal action as a therapeutic approach in a kind of a better sense of a word. So we're looking at how can we mandate treatment? How can we mandate any kind of, medications? How can we mandate community service, empathy building? All of the things that go into preventing acts of mass violence. We operate on 3 lines of effort: community outreach, education, and direct intervention. I'll go into these a little bit more, but we can't function without all of this. So it's a 3-pronged approach. It's not, one way or the highway. So when I talk about those 3 lines of effort, this is what I mean. Our community outreach is reaching out to those at-risk groups, faith-based communities, LGBTQ+, racial and cultural groups, you name it. And we're also working with local practitioners who are also working in this prevention space. You might not know, but there's about 90 to 100 different people who are also doing similar work to what we're doing, but we're the only one that's a law enforcement pre-criminal based intervention. For our education, we're bringing relevant trainings on how to recognize warning signs, indicators that maybe your loved one is moving down that pathway to intended violence. We're also teaching our schools and faith-based communities how to do threat assessment, when to refer, and what options and resources are available to them. We're training the police departments, not only in Aurora, but across the state and across the nation, on how to recognize these things and how to respond to them appropriately. And then also just the general population and our TVP practitioners. Our direct intervention is probably the core of our entire approach. We're doing direct threat assessments with individuals identified to be making plans of mass violence. We're also building threat management plans and things like that with individuals, and we're providing a lot of consultation. When I say we're building a threat management plan, sometimes when we're working with someone, they're involved in 5 or 6 different systems. Maybe that's Child Protective Services, maybe that's Department of Human Services, the school system, maybe they have a basketball coach. We're going to bring a representative from each one of those groups to the table and identify what are you seeing, how can we help and assist, and what do we need to put in place so that they're safe in your environment. And when we do that, we're creating this consistent management plan. And if you have children, you know, if you try to enforce one rule and your partner doesn't, it's not very effective, right? So that's the approach we take here. This is just a slide to kind of show some of the partnerships we have that we work with every single day. These are a bunch of resource groups, local agencies here in the area that provide services, as well as federal government. This is not even a touch on all the people that we work with, but just to kind of give you a small overview. And then some of the successes. So in 2021 alone, we had 74 referrals. I just received the updated number from 2022, and we had 92 referrals. So this goes up. We are very busy. We had that come from 30 different sources in 2021. Came from mostly schools and other jurisdictions or the primary groups, a lot of cultural groups too. Excuse me. We provided 22 different trainings just in that 1 year to over 750 people. And we fostered and maintained 32 standing partnerships, and we actually just formalized 5 more in the last 2 weeks. And we've assisted over 18 different agencies. That includes federal and law enforcement. That means jurisdictional there. Those 2022 reports are being formulated right now and finalized. And when that is complete, we can certainly share that. Next, I would like to just go into a successful averted attack that we had. This will be de-identified. As far as providing more information on demographics, I won't be able to do that because it is an open case, but I'm happy to provide any more information after the presentation about our approach, if that's helpful. So in summer of 2021, we were made aware of an individual who was identified to be a risk. He had told a peer that he was planning to shoot the church down the road from his grandfather's house. Whenever we received this information, we were able to start immediately gathering all of the rest of the information we needed. We looked at mental health records, PD records, anything and everything that would help us establish a baseline, as well as talking with the schools, family, friends, you name it. And with that, it helped us kind of understand really the totality of the situation we had. He had drawn up a map of the church with exit points of where he planned to block off exits. He had ammunition stocked. He had a list of supplies that he was needing for the attack and kind of a grocery list. He made a list of last wishes, and he also had access to firearms. He was just waiting on the GoPro mount to come in. He was going to attack that weekend. So whenever we interviewed this individual, they were very upfront, forthcoming. Yep, that's what I want to do. That's my plan, and here's all the things that I've done to prepare for it, and here's what I'm going to do. We were able to take this person into protective custody or an M1 hold, mental health hold. Some people might know it as like a 5150, 72-hour hold. We were able to do that, and when that happened, we created a delay, which let us immediately kind of jump into our intervention side of the house. We were able to work with our criminal side of the house, our police officers, our DAs, and we were able to actually get charges on this individual. Because of how far along he was in this planning process, this was very much appropriate. But, and again, I'll leave this for you all in the backup. I really won't belabor it because my time is shorter. But we were able to identify resources for the mother because there are specific resources in the community that work to support family members whose children are doing this, or, you know, just family members with them. We were able to work with the DAs to kind of create a plan. Yeah, we're going to arrest him and we're going to put him in custody, but custody is just a delay. It's not going to fix our problem. So with that, we were able to set up different supportive things while he was in custody, a de-radicalization course. We were able to get him involved in ongoing treatment, medication, things like that. And all of this led to a successful reintegration back in the community. So he was actually on a 3-year parole. And with that, we are very involved with that reintegration team. So we work regularly with the schools, with his DA, his parole, his family, all of this. And now this is a very new thing for him. So he was in a halfway house. He was in custody for quite some time, then moved to a halfway house and is now reintegrating back to living with his mother and going back to school. but with very strict parameters. And we provide a lot of consultation to all of those different groups. We do regular check-ins with the family. I think the main part that I want you all to take away from this is it's not just us doing the work. It's not just the schools. It's very much bringing together all of those silos. We hear there's danger in silos. We bring together all of those groups and make sure everyone's on the same page and holding up their end of the deal. So we're not letting the schools kind of miss their opportunity. We're not letting the family fall to the wayside. We're making sure everyone is being held accountable for what their role is in the management of this person. I will tell you, this person's doing very well. They should be actually coming back home in the next few weeks. Lots of safety planning, lots of meetings with that individual have taken place, and so far so good. So we continue to be an active part of this person's management plan and what they will be doing in the community, and we plan to do regular check-ins. But this is just one of our cases that we've had. Again, this is in your backup. I'm happy to answer more questions that are specific to our intervention side of the house. Due to time, I will leave it at that. Questions? Sorry, I know the case part was a little more rushed.
I just have a quick question. So he hadn't committed the crime, but he made the threat. Is that basically what the charges were like intent or what?
Sure. So with the level of planning that he had done, it was shown intent. I can't really speak to the criminal side. So Lieutenant Pendleton, if you'd like to add.
Based upon these circumstances and all the substantial steps that he had taken, Arapahoe County DA's office was able to charge him with attempted first-degree murder with extreme indifference. So very serious charge.
And it ended up with a 3-year parole rather than DOC time. He did spend time in custody, but we were able to approach it from more of a supportive and actual rehabilitative approach that was much more effective than just time in custody. So I will let Lieutenant Pendleton answer that as well.
A red flag law wouldn't be applicable here because he would have a mandatory protection order that prohibits him from having weapons in the first place. So that was part of his agreement.
Flagged in the system.
Excuse me?
He's flagged from purchasing.
Yes.
Can you explain to, so he's gonna live back with his mother, and I don't obviously know this family, but so would that mean that the mother isn't allowed to have guns in the home?
That's a great question. Sorry, Lieutenant.
If he is in the home or going back to the home, she cannot have weapons in there. She'd be violating the order as well.
And she understands this?
Yes.
She does, yep. So on the legal
She's been
side.
very cooperative throughout the entire process. It's
Absolutely.
kind of a bad situation. She's doing everything she can.
Yep. And on the legal side, that's certainly it. And then we also have some more countermeasures, as we call them, for mom, and mom has been very helpful as well. Most of the firearms that were accessible to him were in the grandfather's home. And so the grandfather also employed some additional safety measures. They hid all of the safes, things like that, gun locks, additional pieces there. He's not allowed on the internet by himself. He's got a proctor. Mom actually has an app that checks who's texting him, when he's getting text, what that content is. So lots of monitoring. It's not something we take lightly, for sure. Just because it seems like a success now doesn't mean that things can't change. We are very hopeful for this individual. This is probably the best example of success in this field as a whole. It's really hard to prove when you prevent something, as you know, with youth violence prevention as well. So we're actually being recognized nationally for this case right now, kind of more on the de-identified level and more within the prevention practitioner space. But we did actually just apply to present at the Association of Threat Assessment Professionals with this exact case study.
I know last month, we talked about focused deterrence and potentially bringing that program here. And I know it's more geared towards youth violence. How, if we brought that program here, would there be integration between targeted this program and the focused deterrence program?
Absolutely. So we already kind of use the focused deterrence model within this program. So whenever someone comes onto our radar, we immediately kind of do the background. What's the baseline? What do we have first off? And then once we have that, we meet with the individual and we give them what's called rules of engagement. We give them a formal document that says, here's the line for criminal charges. Here's where you're at. If you don't do X, Y, Z and engage in these different resources and kind of move off that pathway, you will be charged. So we give them that, they sign it, and then we will also do kind of direct interviews and intervention to try and determine what resources are missing, what's lacking. So the way that I see it working with youth violence prevention is, since ours is not really focused on gang group violence, we certainly encounter a lot of youth, but it's a very different kind of community. I work very closely with Joseph already, and we've already kind of discussed maybe what that kind of continuum might look like. And sometimes we'll get referrals that are much more appropriate for youth violence prevention and vice versa.
Last question. Have you had an opportunity or have you been asked to present to the public or in any sort of community events on this here?
Yes,
Besides-
actually yesterday at AKCRT, I was asked by Cydia's group to present very briefly. I did not include the case study just because it is a little more sensitive and I think this group would maybe take a little more away from it, but absolutely.
Yeah, I think that would be a beneficial with, and I'll encourage my colleagues when they do town halls. I mean, we hear a lot from our residents and asking us, what are we doing? What are we doing? And the truth is there are a lot of things that are going on, and this is obviously a very difficult challenge to address when you're talking about public safety, but we have programs that are showing some success, and I think the more our community hears about it, the better.
Absolutely. Thank you, council member, for that support.
My last thing, have you still been steady with hiring?
We have actually, yep. So we only have one more position to hire, which is our mobile response team clinician, but we have 6 clinicians, 2 case managers hired. Actually, 4 of them have already been onboarded. We have 2 more starting next week. So we already have people out and on the road.
Thank you so much.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, council.
Just one quick question.
Yes,
Is there
sorry.
any type of proactive participation with social media companies, with law enforcement such as Snapchat, where they can flag certain types of discourse about a mass shooting or a threat?
Sure. So with Snapchat, it's a little more difficult, but as far as Facebook, more of the ones that don't necessarily disappear right after. Discord's a very big one. We often get safe to tells. I'm imagining you're familiar with safe to tell. If not, it's an anonymous reporting, the see something, say something kind of campaign. It's not necessarily the app itself or the website or organization itself saying, hey, this is something we're scared of, but oftentimes people in the community will provide report on that. Now the school systems, all of them, if the student's using a school laptop, if any of you have children, Gaggle or the different things that will flag words that will pop up. So if the student types in gun, even if it's for a report, it will flag in their system. So oftentimes we'll get notified that way by the schools. Most agencies now, like TikTok, Instagram, all of the big social media sites have their own threat assessment and management teams. And we actually do a lot of consulting with them. We assisted a very smaller social media kind of startup, very initially in the beginning with setting up their threat management and assessment program. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for giving me the time today.
Right, item 4B, consent decree monitor, 3rd report update.
Good morning, all. Thank you for having me. Having a little technical difficulty in terms of the presentation, and I wonder if you may be able to put that up on the screen for me to run through. And I'm going to run through it quickly because I do want to leave as much time as possible for questions and answers.
We're working feverishly to sort of get it pulled up. Give us just a second, Jeff.
Okay, thanks. There we go. Perfect. Next slide, please. So just a brief overview for those who may be listening via Aurora TV or otherwise. The consent decree grows out of the Attorney General investigation and ultimately out of negotiations between the city and the Attorney General, which resulted in the actual document called the consent decree on November 16th, 2021. Next slide, please. The consent decree called for the position of an independent monitor. IntegraSure and myself were chosen for that position, and we have a number of different roles. The oversight of the mandates in the decree itself, providing technical assistance, engagement with the community, and reporting to the parties, court, and public. And it is that last one that we are here to review. It is our 3rd reporting period report. That reporting period ended on November 15th, and our report was issued on January 15th. Next slide, please. Again, what we have done with respect to the consent decree, is disaggregated. And what does that mean? It means that we took each of the mandates of the consent decree. We worked with the city and other stakeholders in developing a protocol for our assessment of those mandates. We agreed on that protocol, and that assessment protocol is called the methodologies to aid in the determination of compliance. And for each report, we do that for not necessarily all of the mandates, but the mandates that we are going to be looking at that period. In this period, we reviewed 58 of the 72 mandates. Next slide, please. These are the areas of the consent decree. Again, both oversight and technical assistance and policies and training, bias policing, use of force, stops and investigative encounters, use of chemical sedatives, recruitment, hiring, promotion, and accountability and transparency. Next slide, please. I've talked about the methodologies to aid in determination of compliance, so we'll go on to the next slide, please. This is how we go about graphically representing our assessment in each of these reporting periods. And by the way, for the first year, there are 4 reporting periods, that is quarterly. After that, there are only 2 reporting periods a year. That will be every 6 months thereafter. And we judge things by whether or not they are on the right track, a cautionary track, or the wrong track, and also by the level of completion towards substantial compliance that we estimate that particular mandate is at. Next slide, please. This is the overview, and I don't expect anybody to really get much out of it during this presentation, but you can go back to it and look. The good news is we have nothing on the red side, on the wrong track. We do have a number of items on the cautionary track. We do have a number of items which are in substantial compliance, that full green Harvey ball, and then another number of items which are in various stages relative to the right track. Next slide, please. We also, in each of our reports, write about certain issues, focus issues, we call them. We wrote in our last report about the new interim chief and our hope that the progress that had been made continued, and Chief Acevedo is really digging into the consent decree and helping in every way possible. So I couldn't be happier about his involvement and his efforts. We talked about improving police community relations and what the department was doing. We talked about the body-worn camera audit by the police auditor. We talked about the design of civilian oversight infrastructure that needs to be in place at the time that we leave. We talked about the gun violence reduction grant. We, of course, issued our hiring report, which this committee is well aware of. And lastly, we talked about internal investigations and the disciplinary system. Next slide, please. We found 11 mandates to be in substantial compliance, 2 regarding how AFR develops and updates policy, 9 centered on AFR's discontinuation of the use of ketamine. And just so that everyone knows, we review every administration of chemical sedative, both on the reports and body-worn camera video when that is available as well. And we do that for each reporting period. There are 3 mandates that were in substantial compliance from a prior period. That included the contacts policy form, which we'll talk a little bit more about, the joint APD, AFR policy on cooperation, and the hiring of the expert for recruitment, hiring, and promotion. Next slide, please. This reporting period was different than last reporting periods in that it contained significantly more items on the cautionary track. This was due mainly to missed deadlines, which were provided in the consent decree. I think that those deadlines were perhaps overly aggressive. The department has been hard at work, and we have been working with them relative to developing those policies. Nonetheless, they were contained in the consent decree itself, so we put these on a cautionary track. So that was 20 relative to missed deadlines, 10 in the contacts policy, 19 in use of force policies, and then there were 9 that were due to uncertainty of ability to meet the expectations. That included the analyzing and transmitting of contact data to the state, and a continued concern relative to FRB needing to be more focused and more critical of events that they were reviewing. And I have to say that has improved significantly since November 15th. We attend each force review board, and the progress has been significant and noteworthy. And then the last one was the uncertainty, again, which this committee is familiar with the Civil Service Commission rewriting the rules on hiring. Next slide, please. So substantial compliance, when all of those Harvey balls are green, that will equal success. I've done this for a long time. I've seen what success looks like and what it can bring to a community. I have every reason to believe that we are on that path. It is a marathon. It doesn't happen overnight. In Los Angeles, in fact, it took 9 years for it to happen. I am confident we will be able to do it here with the continued cooperation that we have received within the 5-year period. With that, I'm happy to take any questions that you all may have.
Jeff, I have a couple of questions for you.
Sure.
So first, I'm happy to hear the comment that you made about the improvements on the force review board and the more focus on continuous improvement. Can you elaborate on that a little bit? I mean, what is it that you've seen since November that gives you a little bit more hope that we're making progress?
Yeah, so again, we attend every force review board, and the comments which have been made previously and the concern that I had specifically was a lack of critical review. And what do I mean by that? What could have been done to have achieved a better outcome? Now, some people may call that Monday morning quarterback. I don't believe that is the right way to look at this. I think if we look at the airline industry, if we look at the medical profession, after action reviews and determinations as to how a better outcome could be achieved is all important. We were particularly concerned with that in the realm, and you heard just in the prior presentation about mental health concerns. Particularly in that area, we were concerned about it, and that specifically in the last few force review boards has gotten significantly better.
So to be clear on that, Jeff, your concern leading into this report wasn't that they weren't being critical of whether or not somebody was following the law or policy. It was just, are we taking a more an even step further and asking ourselves, was there an even better way? And maybe the answer is no, but asking those questions, and you're saying that's improved.
That's exactly right, Chair.
But the second question I had was on civil service hiring. With that deadline, what is the I know that we've blown through some deadlines, which is why we had a bunch of yellow this past report. If we miss that deadline, is there a possibility that a district court compels a process on us? And how would that look?
Well, for our evaluation, it would look as a red, right, wrong track. And our reports do go to the court. That would, of course, be a last resort, but that is contemplated in the decree itself as a potential avenue of remediation.
And is Jeff, is that the typical process? One of the concerns that has been raised, I'm sure not just myself, but other members of council, is when you talk about you all are our independent monitor. And there was discussion about the fact that we had created an office of an independent monitor, never was actually staffed prior to the consent decree. You all came on and we eliminated those roles. The concern was that you all didn't have the ability to ensure that these mandates and the changes that you're recommending or that are being recommended actually get done. And I just want to be sure that I want to ensure to the public that that in fact is not the case, that you all could, through these reports, make sure that the mandates are met. Is that right?
Correct. Yes, there is ultimately the potential to resort to court action, but really the more immediate hammer, if you will, is that we're not going away until this is. I'm sorry, I lost you there. Are you there still?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah. This is not. We are not going away until, in fact, there is substantial compliance. And this would not be substantial compliance. It would be a red mark on the report card. It would be a wrong track. And hopefully the city as a whole would look at this and say, okay, how do we fix this? And it would be up to the city to come up with the way to fix it. And there are, as you well know, Chair, different avenues of approach to deal with the Civil Service Commission. All that being said, I have every reason to believe that they will, in fact, revise the rules so as to provide not necessarily in complete accord with what we have recommended, because those were recommendations in our technical assistance role, but will comply with the mandates of the consent decree, which in these terms calls for a much more active role and for the final say relative to who is chosen to enter the academy.
So for that, one last question. One of the three areas you talked about was the data requirements, and that was on a cautionary track right now. So two parts to this question, and this might be for you and city staff. One, similar to Forest Review Board, had you seen any type of improvement since November, knowing that this report was being put together in November? So that's question one. If not, this I guess goes to city staff. What are we doing to ensure that we move ourselves out of yellow and towards a green circle?
So I can start. There were really two aspects of that particular mandate. One was that neither APD, the city, nor the monitor was able to look at the contact data which was being collected in an aggregate way to make judgments about, first, whether or not there was compliance with the mandate to fill out the forms, but also to make certain conclusions or observations relative to what was going on relative to stops and contacts. So neither us as the monitor nor the city was able to do that. And then the second aspect was the transmission of the data to the state, which didn't appear to be at least provided for through the programming. And I know that there have been talks between the city and the state. And we are hopeful that before the end of this reporting period, which will be February 15th, that data that is for last year, 2022, will be transmitted to the state. And perhaps Jason or Pete have more of an update on that.
Sure. Yeah, so we did check, Megan, the police legal advisor, Megan Platt, to check with the technology side of the PD. They are working with Benchmark. The JSON file is what the state is requesting to get the data submitted to them. And because of the consent decree and because of what we're doing here, we are actually collecting more data than is required under state law. And so what became the issue was we had put all of our data that we're collecting into that JSON file and submitted it to the state. It would have been rejected because they just have to submit what the state requests. So that's what they're working on. The timing that I'm told right now is by the end of February. Benchmark has confirmed that they will have it submitted to the state by the end of February. I am on a committee with the Department or the Division of Criminal Justice statewide. We got an email yesterday that they're going to have a meeting next Thursday. I have the impression that I got is there's still some kinks to work out even statewide. So hopefully next meeting I can have more of an update here that I think A, we'll have the data submitted, and B, we'll have kind of an idea what's going on statewide.
And Chair, just one last thing to add. The Benchmark did work with us and provided us with a file that we are able to make certain manipulate and determine the things that I mentioned before. And we are looking at that first in terms of compliance, and we will be reporting on that and working with the city to ensure that there is compliance with the mandate to fill out the form when there is a contact, but also with respect to the analysis of the data as well to see whether or not there is anything noteworthy in that analysis that might be useful going forward.
All right, Jeff, thank you. Thank you so much for the presentation. We will move on to item 4C, Aurora Municipal Court Workload Study Proposal.
Hi, I'm Candace Atkinson. I'm the court administrator and the detention director. During the 2023 budget retreat, I think $150,000 was put aside for a workload study for the courts. I reached out to the National Center, which I understand is the same organization that we reached out to prior when the funds were withdrawn for this study. And I have worked with the National Center. When I worked in Phoenix, we worked with them to set up national standards for jury and jury management. So I felt very comfortable working with them and reaching out to them. So in the packet is the proposal that they have. The National Center, I think most of us that work in the judicial side have and are aware of the National Center, but they are a nonprofit. They've been around since 1971. They actually have offices here in Denver, but they not only have on staff, they work out and hire consultants that are specialized in the areas that they're working in. And they actually have worked globally with courts across the world. So they're very highly regarded and have a lot of experience. With this study that they propose, they won't just work with just the judges or just the attorneys. They work with all staff. And it's a 12-week study where, they work with the staff. They not only look at the time, but they look at, is staff happy? Are they stressed? Is the workload correct? Are the policies and procedures in place? Is there policies and procedures that need updated? And also duplicate work or efficiencies that can happen. So their study, if we go forward, hopefully we can begin in March, and a final report would not be available until April of 2024. The cost is a little bit higher than anticipated. It's $210,519. If we include the public defender's office, it's an additional $35,000. But that's pretty much all that I have. Most of the information is in the packet. along with the bios from the consultants that they're showing, will work with us.
I have one question for you, that just arose yesterday, and I don't actually know if this is even directed for you, but it's, about jury selection. I received a call yesterday from a woman, and I know at least one other member of council did as well. This woman's very, very upset about the jury selection process in Aurora, and she said that she believes that it used to be, age 75 and up. Was not called for jury duty. Her husband received notification. He was told to come in for jury duty, and apparently her husband's 88 years old, can't hear and can't walk, is almost completely immobile. She tried to call in on his behalf to the city to say, look, my husband can't even hear, he can't walk. And the city said essentially, well, you have to provide a doctor's note or something. Did this used to be a rule that 75 and up was not called for jury duty?
Well, they can be summoned because it's up to them. We can't exclude them because of their age, because that would be discrimination.
Sure.
But if they call in and ask to be excused, they should not be required to provide doctor's notes. So I'd have to find specifically, sometimes they get us mixed up with the state courts too. But I'd have to, maybe if you give me a little more information, but I know when I was in,
Very upset.
oh, I'm sorry.
Very upset.
But we'll look into it, but we can't just not send them a summons, but they
Yeah.
should be automatically allowed to, be excused if they choose to.
Yeah, can I get with you and give you this woman's phone number for you to?
Of course.
Follow back up with her? That would be wonderful. That was pretty much all I had for you. Do you have anything?
My question is, and I can't tell, but I think Judge Day is right there.
Yeah, he's here.
And so I just wanted an update on the domestic violence legislation, because I would assume that if that went forward, if municipal courts were no longer allowed to do domestic violence, that would significantly impact. I think Doug mentioned it was a huge percentage of the cases in his office. I'm sure it's the same thing in your docket.
Yep.
So that would impact it, but just wondering an update.
You bet. No, thank you for the question. As it stands of this morning, that bill has not been introduced. There's still a lot of meetings taking place regarding proposed modifications or amendments to the original draft of the bill. We have not been part of those discussions or those meetings. We're trying to keep our ear to the wall as to what's taking place in those subsequent meetings. As you know, we did meet with bill sponsor of the draft at the Capitol, had a meeting and had a very good discussion. But as it stands right now, it has not been introduced. I haven't heard if it is going to be introduced in the original draft form or if there are considerations for some amendments that have been proposed. And one of the amendments, well, actually, there's a three-part proposal to the draft bill, and that was to have the Victims' Rights Amendment apply to municipal courts or any comparable municipal court charge. Municipal courts would need to comply with the VRA. They would also need to comply and be in conformity with the state sentencing requirements for domestic violence charges. That would also be part of the proposed amendment. And what's the third? And sharing of data within domestic violence. We already report all of our domestic violence cases to the state through CBI. They get them on to CCIC and NCIC. Most of what is being proposed in the way of amendment, we already do, although it would be put into law statutorily that the VRA would be required in municipal court. So again, as of this morning, has been introduced. I'm hopeful that those amendments are being considered. That's the best update that I can give.
Has there been any input from the VAs? And I know that this impacts only 3 of the VA's offices, right? The first, 17th, and 18th, I believe. It's
Primarily.
Yeah.
Yep.
It was Denver, Lakewood, and us.
Second, which is Denver, the first,
which is Jeffco,
and 17th and 18th primarily. We've reached out to all 4 of those JDs, those judicial districts. They all when I say they, from state judicial standpoint, the impact from within the courtroom, within the judges, whether or not they have capacity to accept all of the municipal DV cases is of great concern to all 4 judicial districts. 3 of the 4, I believe, district attorney's offices have great concern about absorbing those cases in county court, or if they're felony level, serious bodily injury in district court. The 18th, within John Kellner's office, I think that they're still looking at the issue of what impact it would have. I would suspect, I want to speak for them, that they would have the same concern as the 17th, 1st and 2nd. Would have a tremendous impact, not only within the prosecutor's office, the public defender's office, state public defender, the courts, everybody would have, it would have great impact on all of this. So,
That's all the questions I have.
sure, thank you for asking.
Okay, thank you guys. So the last item under general business is the Aurora Safety Action Plan update.
Yes, ma'am. Okay, so we'll go through this. We've got other folks in the room. So first item up is the crime reduction plan. You see the numbers in front of you in terms of the different metrics, in terms of our staffing and the vacancies in the different units. You also see some of the same numbers that Division Chief Jewell addressed in terms of the academy. I think the numbers he probably gave today are actually a little even more updated. So we've got better numbers given verbally. And then the other thing we'll highlight real quick is in terms of the training. We did do our in-service topics this quarter are going to be ICAT, firearms arrest controls, and the transition to TASER 7. So I think it's a good update for you all. So any questions on that first item?
One question. So on motor vehicle theft, I've been obviously watching that with particular interest. And it seems like each month we've had these updates. It's been red. Obviously, there's way too many cars still being stolen in Aurora. So I'm not trying to suggest that we don't have a big problem. But one of the questions I have, 2 questions, and I don't know if we have this data available, but if we could get it, it would be helpful. Is this something that we're seeing everywhere else, a decrease in motor vehicle theft? And 2, how does ours compare relative to the rest of the city?
I don't know on the comparisons to the other agencies. We can look at that. John provided, and we'll get it to you all, a really good look that actually looked at it by quarter going back the last 3 years. And I think it's a very telling chart that John and his team put together. The good news is it's a little bit of silver lining to obviously, as you noted, the numbers are still way too high. But for the entire year 2023, we saw it spike in the first quarter and then consistently come down to where our fourth quarter numbers are in the ballpark of where we were the 2 prior years. So I think our challenge will to make sure that we continue that trend. And so we'll get you all that data and then perhaps look and see what we're seeing around that area. Obviously, CMAT does a very good job looking at some of my folks across the way. I don't know how timely CMAT's data is, but we'll get the data from CMAT for the regional stuff. CMAT is the Colorado Metropolitan Area or Auto Theft Task Force. They have that acronym, right? Yes. And so we'll get you the data from CMAT in terms of what we're seeing across the range. Anything to add?
I'll add some of that CMAT data to next month's stats, if that's okay, Councilmember.
Yeah, that would be helpful.
They send that out, I think quarterly but I'll find some for you.
And then we'll get you all that the data. We'll actually follow after this and show you that chart that John and his team put together that kind of shows you that trend. Our challenge now is to continue that trend. Right. So that's the first item. And then going back to the next item, the next item is section 2 is our data collection. You again see the metrics there. The piece I will add to that is that as Jeff spoke about earlier, one of the items kind of underpinning the entire consent decree is data and transparency. So we've had some good discussions over the last several weeks around one of the requirements coming up here the next couple of weeks is to have a plan on data transparency. I think the 18th DA has a very good data transparency dashboard out there. We're looking at that. We've looked at a number of other agencies, and so we're going to be putting a plan in place to share a lot of the data that we're collecting already, as you heard on contacts, on some of this other stuff. So that's not something that's going to be in the immediate offing here, but over the rest of this year, we're hoping to kind of stand that up and start rolling out some data transparency in terms of a lot of this data. So we'll have more for you all here in the coming months on that. Greg, anything to add on that? Section 3 is our youth violence. So we've got some numbers in there, and then I'll turn it over to Joe.
Sure. Really, the biggest update I just wanted to share with you all is that the NOFO grants are set to go live March 6th. Team currently on getting that out to the community now before it goes live, and I'll be doing 2 to 3 info sessions with the grantees. That'll be one of the requirements considered. So those will be going live March 6th. They'll be live for 4 straight weeks. With March 31st as the deadline for those applications.
One question. So last month, when we had the presentation on focused deterrence, is there any chance we could do that at a study session, condensed version of it? And what would be the timeline for that actually? Is that?
Yes.
Plan for March
Oh,
6th.
perfect.
Yeah.
Oh, great.
Yep.
That's
We
good.
can have more when we meet on Mondays.
And we know that a couple of you all had some follow-up after that meeting, and we're gonna, again, on that condensed version, but then also make sure we're answering your questions before we go into that.
Okay, great.
Item, section 4 of the, this is our Aurora Crisis Response Team. You got a quick update there, I think, off, out of sequence, but
Yes, one more thing to add, we are doing interviews for our data analysts today. We have 3 really great candidates, so it'll be the next few weeks that they'll be onboarded. And what that will do is will help satisfy one of the recommendations from Michelle Crawford's audit of having a better way of identifying the mental health calls that are coming through the city. That person will also be looking at fires data, code enforcement, things like that, to just look at the overall mental health need that we're seeing.
I have one question. I had a call with counterpart in Denver recently. Is there any way that, because they have a crisis response team too as well, right?
Correct.
Do we do any sort of collaboration with their clinicians? And is there a way to set up some sort of an IGA where if we, because a lot of the areas that I would assume we have as our hotspots would be theirs as well. And so I just wondered if that had been considered or any type of that work already.
Great question, Councilmember. Yes, we do a lot of intercollaborative work. As you know, Aurora's right on the border of Denver, Yosemite area. We have a lot of people who will, start up in our area, cross over into Denver. So we communicate with Denver's team very, very often. We'll often send referrals over to them. They'll send referrals over to us. We'll have kind of a case staffing meeting, things like that. And we do that with other jurisdictions as well that have crisis response teams. So Littleton, Inglewood. We very much try and keep the lines of communication open, in compliance with HIPAA and information sharing guidelines, but we do try and assist wherever we can.
Final item is then our encampments and cleanups. You see the numbers there.
The only thing I have is we're currently hiring for an additional staff member to help with the abatements so that they can go a little bit smoother. It's a lot of work for one person. So that position is currently open. If you know anyone who you'd like to pass that along to, please do so. We have a couple, we've only gotten like 3 applicants so far. We're trying to get it posted in more places, but yeah, just spread the word, share it.
If council members are allowed to volunteer for that position, I might know one that would volunteer sometime. Saying.
And have we run into any issues where we haven't had beds available and we've had to do an abatement?
No, not yet. We always have beds available with the pallets, and then at Comitas, we always have some space. That's part of the agreement with Comitas.
Well, thank you. So then we will go into miscellaneous matters, and I think you have something you want to ask.
Yeah, this might be for Jason. Any progress on the feasibility of incorporating e-discovery for the court system to sync up with police records? I know that was discussed several months ago.
Turn that over to Julie. So
okay.
We are working. Our office has been working with court IT as well as city IT, working to get together all the documentation that will be needed for the RFP, which includes security issues, a lot of the things from Scott's folks, security issues, and then all of the integration, which really is Court IT, all the things that we currently have that would need to be integrated by the vendor. So trying to get that contract ready that we'll bring forward to council. So hopefully we will be able to have a schedule that we could update next month on what that schedule looks like. And the vendor at the same time, my understanding is the vendor is working, already starting to put together something similar, or how they would put together something similar to what the CDAC system, which is what you heard a lot about at the budget workshop.
So will the IT component of that remain within the court system or go to general IT?
I would let the IT folks in the room speak to that.
And what would the court like with respect to that?
Well, I mean, the hope is with the vendor that it'll take IT eventually out of that process. We'll always be there for support because we are kind of in the middle of it in some aspects, but the hope is that it will relieve some of the pressure off of our IT.
Thank you.
All right, and then to confirm the next meeting, I think we're looking at March 9th.
Yes, ma'am.
Is that it? Okay. March.
The other thing I'll add, apologies, Yelena was able to get this for the entire year, so we'll be here for your direction in person, so we've got this room booked, so she only had to twist a few arms, kick a few kneecaps, so good job on that, so we're not moving rooms around.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm sure this room was so booked and the first one to come
We
back.
actually had a few of them.
Right? I'm
We
a
had a few of them,
trailblazer here, so. Okay, perfect. So March 9th at 9 a.m. here in person. And with that, this meeting is adjourned. There you go. Show up and spit
Hey,
it
Scott.
out.
It's on that deal. And I'm like, no.